Hello, everyone, and welcome to our masterclass today. We are very excited to host you. Today, we are talking about a journey to the cloud with Datametica and Looker. So overall, today's goal is to talk about how you can leverage a new modern infrastructure and then Looker on top of that infrastructure to give you the insights and value that you need. So a few housekeeping notes, first of all. My name is Allison. I'm going to be your MC today. I'm with the Google Cloud and Looker sales team. We do have you all on mute, but that doesn't mean we don't want participation. So if you could please chat in any questions into the Q&A chat box on the side of your screen, that would be excellent. We're also going to be asking a few poll questions throughout today's session. So please provide your answers. It's all anonymous, so you can answer truthfully, and that'll just really help with our conversations. So with that, I'd like to introduce you to our presenters. Today we have Dr. Phil, the president of Datametica, as well as Mr. Philip Hall, one of our customer engineers with Google Cloud and Looker. Dr. Phil, take it away.
Very good. Thank you, Alison. Let's go to the next slide. So a little introduction for myself. I'm ex-CIO and CTO for many years. We formed Datametica based on customer experience, trying to move to cloud manually ourselves, and certainly found that to be challenging for larger companies. So we spent the last 7.5 years developing automation tools to move the largest and most complex data warehouses in the world to cloud. We focus particularly on Google Cloud. We even move between clouds, so we can move from Amazon Azure, for example, to GCP. We focus on larger data warehouses like Teradata, Netezza, Oracle, Greenplum, SAS, migration to GCP, and also Hadoop. So we were big proponents of Hadoop in the early days. Our aim at Datametica is to get people moved to cloud the fastest possible ramp up onto GCP. The lowest risk we take. I'm going to explain how we take the risk and the cost and the time out of these migrations in a minute. So I think Philip is going to do a little intro for himself and for Looker.
Yeah, so hey everyone, great to meet you. I'm Phil Hall, one of the two Phils that you'll have the pleasure of listening to speak on today's call. And so I'm a solution architect here at Looker, then now at Looker/Google for almost 3 years. And prior to that, I was at Accenture in their big data and analytics practice. So some of the things that most excites me are just thinking of creative ways to use data to better an organization. And so that's one thing that's been really exciting about working at Looker is we like to think of a Looker as a solution that doesn't just do your standard data and analytics or your dashboarding, but really wanting to be in a platform to help drive data experiences. So ensuring that everyone has a consistent definition and view of the data, but also using that in a lot of creative outlets that go beyond dashboarding and reporting. We'll be diving a lot more into some of those concepts, including some customer stories today. But for right now, we'll keep it at a high level. So we'll get started, and I'll pass it back to Phil to start going over the beginning of that data modernization journey.
Okay, just a little more depth on Datametica before I get started on that. But Datametica is a premier partner. We have specializations in several areas. Datametica was the first partner in the world to be recognized as a migration partner for both Teradata and Netezza, for example, and now it's many other areas that we migrate. And we work globally, just so everyone knows. So first of all, why modernize the cloud? So I'm going to get into a few slides why. It's pretty obvious. I think many of you understand that the move to cloud is really growing. But the cloud, especially on GCP now, we have the luxury of very tightly coupled data integration and analytics tools. Best-in-breed tools for data pipelines, eliminating legacy thinking like batch-based, loading of files in ETL. Those things can be completely eliminated now and moved to native data ingestion. That's particularly true because as most industries modernize, they go to real-time or micro-batch. IoT is all requiring real-time streaming and more rapid response to analytics to make and I think Philip's going to talk about that later. So making analytics actionable in real time is really important. Making the data pipelines real time or near to real time is important. That's an important thing for us moving to cloud, is to change the way we think about data ingestion. And we almost always address the modernization of the ETL piece as part of that. We're moving most analytics on Google Cloud to BQ. BigQuery is a superb piece of technology. The scalability, performance, cost are really unmatched. And now with the AutoML and machine learning add-ons, and now Looker as well, we have an incredible set of tools based on BQ. We can a lot of people are concerned about moving to cloud for performance reasons. I was a Teradata customer for a long time. For example, we had 2 large Teradata environments. There was a common belief you can't move those large data warehouses to cloud and get acceptable performance on cloud. That probably was true, actually, in the early days. It's certainly not the case now. We are reliably exceeding Teradata performance on BQ, on Google Cloud, and very significant cost reduction in the order of, well over 50% cost reduction moving large data warehouses to Google Cloud. So there's no reason not to modernize to BQ anymore. And then native tools and interactive tools like Looker, built on top of the GCP stack, are very powerful, and Phil's going to show you some of those things later. So GCP, in our view, as I said, Datametica does do work on Azure, Snowflake, AWS, and other Hadoop implementations, but we do most of our work on GCP, and there's a reason for that. Most larger companies we work with choose GCP because it's the highest performance, lowest cost, best integrated solution there is around. It's very elegant and simple architecture. There's not really duplication of tools. There's a best in breed tool for each job, and they're tightly coupled and integrated. Most of the tools we use are serverless and managed services, and so it takes away significant overhead for DBAs and other kind of work that you may be doing on-premise and with legacy systems. GCP has, with BQ, AutoML and AI capabilities built in. Looker on top of that brings significant possibilities for analytics, and Phil's going to talk about that. I did mention cost reductions. Cost reductions are in the range of 50 to 60 to 70% in some cases, going to from a legacy data warehouse and analytics solution to cloud. We do want to modernize ETL. It's very common. Almost always we modernize the ETL. We want to have high availability in DR. I was unfortunate enough to be an IT executive that had an outage of a data center for several days due to an explosion and fire, and not having high availability in DR for all of your systems, not just some of them, but all of them, is a big headache with legacy on-premise. With cloud, having HA and DR is a few clicks away and relatively easy and much lower cost to implement. And the rapid development of new workloads, new analytics on a unified data model, getting rid of data silos. We have multiple silos on premise, usually bringing them together into a unified data model on cloud, where we have the scale to join and do analytics on a data set in one place, is a huge productivity improvement. So one thing I'd like to do now is ask you some questions. There's a poll on the screen here, and we're going to show the results live. So if you would select what you think are the main challenges of migrating to cloud, I'm going to leave this up for about 30 seconds. So you have about 30 seconds to submit your answer, and then I'll show you the results. Okay, I'm going to switch it now. I'll give you the last 5 seconds. Okay, see what we got. So risk, yes, that's great, actually. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Time, skills, risk, and cost. Some of you, all of them, which is true. They were slightly staged questions, of course, because they're the common things that come up when we talk to people. So the common challenges we see are here. So, and they are very much in line with what you just said. So skills and resources, and how would you do that? How would you migrate? how do I get started? I don't even know where to start. Taking a large data warehouse like Teradata and say, how do I start to move that without the risk, as you just answered in the questions, without the risk of causing business disruption? I have no idea how to do that. And that's what we struggled with as customers ourselves, more than 10 years ago now. Risk in the middle box here, that was the #1 vote from the poll there. How do you validate the data? This is something that a lot of people forget. If you have, let me say, 500 terabytes of data in a data warehouse on premise, and now you make a copy of that 500 terabytes on cloud, how do you validate that? That data is changing all the time. There's real-time batch coming in, there's user queries, workload. It's impossible. It's like trying to track a moving train there. It's not possible to compare that amount of data on cloud. But it is possible now. We've developed the tools to be able to do that because you have to validate the data in real time. And of course, migrations will take years. Well, most migrations did take years in the early days. In my own example, it took years to do it. Companies, very early pioneers moving to cloud, like Home Depot, took almost 3 years to do manually. We now routinely are moving Hadoop in as little as 10 weeks. We're moving Netezza in for 4 to 5 months. We're moving Teradata in 6 to 12 months. It doesn't take years anymore. It used to. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, we have to look at discovery. What's the big picture here? What's the detail in those data warehouses we have to move? How do we discover all that complexity? Who's running what queries? Who's connected to which tables? We have to discover that. We have to move the historical data and the incremental workload. We have to figure on the transformations. So there's transformations written, let's say, on Teradata in BTEC scripts. There's transformations in an ETL tool like DataStage or Informatica. How do we move the transformations to cloud? And all the workload. There's all the different SQL dialects. There's PL SQL. There's Netezza SQL. There's Teradata SQL. There is DB2 SQL, and they're all different SQLs. So how do we deal with that? Well, that's what we focused on at solving in the last almost 8 years as we formed Datametica. So we formed these tools, happen to be all called birds. At least they're not called Phil. They're called birds. And they're all predator birds, actually, ironically. But the first tool is an Eagle tool. It's a planner. It discovers everything that's running on a data warehouse. We scan the logs on the data warehouse. We join all that data together in a graph database. We have machine learning that builds clusters of workload based on that graphing of data to look at the tables, the temporary tables, the permanent tables, the data pipelines, the user access, the queries, the ETLs, and we build a 3D model of everything that's running, including all the things that are running on your data warehouse that you don't even know about, because a lot of it is not even documented. And we come up with a migration plan in sprints. So we break it down into small steps in the Eagle tool, and we interactively work with our clients to figure out the sequence of those migration sprints. The next piece is how do we convert all the code? So we have all the ETLs we talked about. We may have data stage transformations. We might have Informatica, we might have others. We will certainly have workload and SQL for users and for machine IDs. We have BTEC scripts, stored procedures, and other things have to be converted. Well, we developed a tool that reads different dialects of SQL and stored procedures and produces BQ, SQL, and scripts as a result, as an example. We can produce other types of SQL. So it takes one dialect of SQL and language in and automatically produces different dialect of SQL out, typically BQ. So now we take maybe 60, 70, 80, sometimes 90% of the work away for the code conversion, which is the next big step. Finally, how do we run these systems in parallel? If you have, my 500 terabyte example, how do you bring piece by piece of that workload over and user groups by user groups over and run in parallel? Well, we have to be able to run in parallel for extended periods of time. Financial services, I just talked to one this morning, they want to run a month end and probably a quarter end, at least in parallel, to make sure the new system on GCP is matching exactly their old system. Well, Pelican allows us to do that. It uses blockchain hashing on both sides. It compares hash trees, and we can match petabytes of data over the network without moving any of the data. So these tools allow us to move about half the time, half the cost, and a lot less risk, almost no risk, because we don't do any big bang cutovers. The whole point of this is to de-risk. the migration. So we avoid this big bang cutover. We break the data sources and the data pipelines and the analytics into these clusters. Clusters are based on users, tables, objects, queries. And then we come up with a migration plan based on that. So it's a cluster-driven migration. We run in parallel for as long as possible or as long as necessary. We really de-risk it completely because we don't cut over until everyone is ready we don't really cut over at all. We just abandon the old system gradually and incrementally. I hope that makes sense. And we can validate data in real time or near real time at a cell level. And the objective here is to get to a modern architecture that is clean and simple and durable and reliable with high availability and DR built in. Most of what we move to on Google Cloud are serverless systems. And if you've not been used to that, the beauty of those are, most of us have been used to running a system of certain capacity, a certain size, a certain number of nodes. The licensing is based on all of that. Well, that concept's gone away. With serverless, we really have no concept of how many servers are running our BigQuery script. We don't need to know. We don't have to control it. We don't have to worry about it. We don't have to do software updates and patches. It's a serverless model. You issue your query, issue your data, and you get your result. It's a whole different paradigm of operations. So we take sources from traditional sources like mainframe and others, IoT, real time, put it into this very simple architecture and enable the next generation of analytics. So what we're going to do now is going to ask you another question. And then Phil, my other cohort, Phil, will pick up from there. So I'm going to leave this up for about 30 seconds, and then you have time to respond.
Yeah, and I can take over driving from here as well, Dr. Phil. But yeah, I think the main reason behind this question is not only do you have a way to de-risk and make this low-cost transition to the cloud, but when you make these migrations, it opens up a whole host of possibilities to rethink the way you might want to use data within an organization. And so that's really the goal of this question is you've clearly chosen to make that cloud journey. But then what do you want to do once that migration piece is done? And how do you want to leverage all these new technologies and start thinking about how data can be used in new ways within the organization? So curious to see what some of the popular ones are here. So just to highlight the options, just as we have more time, some people are really trying to treat data to drive new revenue. Others maybe just want to become a more digital world and start filling into this web-based digital economy that we're going into. Some people want to build a data culture and get data proliferated to all aspects of the organization so that everyone can be making objective decisions. And then there are other companies who maybe all that's really advanced. Like they know they have data and they just want to understand what insights they can uncover. So there's a wide spectrum of maturity when it comes to the things that are possible. And I think this will probably give us a nice snapshot as I transition over here of what everyone else on the call is thinking. All right, so it looks like we have quite a few in the all of the above, but then half of the respondents are just in this bucket of wanting to, we got the data in the cloud, we made this migration, we just need to understand what we have and how it can be used to drive opportunities. So that's definitely a good insight and not honestly that surprising. So we'll make sure to cater the rest of this presentation to one, how there are tools like Looker that can sit on top of these clouds like BigQuery or any other clouds and really help provide a usable framework for how people can understand their data. And then we'll just throw some shades under once you know what your data has, how can you start thinking creatively with it and start building all these other cool data experiences. So this at a high level is Looker's architecture. So you use Datametica, you got all of your data into BigQuery, and Looker is just going to be sitting on top of wherever you have that data stored. And you can really think of Looker in that gray bar as just documenting and defining how data should be used within your organization. So all the different relationships, what's that reusable single source of truth for KPIs, metrics, et cetera. And then how can you use those definitions to actually start understanding what data you have, if there's value in it, and then a whole host of other things. So the very first thing that we're actually emphasizing right now is this orange segment of modern BI and analytics. And so when you can have your data centralized in something like a BigQuery, and then you've defined the mechanisms of how it can or should be used, Looker can definitely do all of your typical things that you expect out of BI: dashboarding, scheduling, report generation. But what separates Looker from a lot of the other solutions on the market is because of the way that we've designed all those relationships. It enables end users to be able to start asking more questions of your data without necessarily needing to have their hands held by IT or an analytics team. And that's because the people who have all of those concepts in their head of the right way to use the data and how to use the data, they've already plugged that information into Looker so that all users, regardless of how tech savvy or analyst savvy that they are, can start asking questions of the data. So when we go back to the fact that 50% of these people on this call just want to understand the data better, the faster way to uncover those insights is to have more people with different perspectives all hopping in and asking those questions. And so Looker provides a really scalable way to take advantage of these cloud technologies, but also thinking of scale as understanding that the more departments that come into Looker and start asking questions of the data, they're all relying those trusted definitions so that you don't get one user creating a calculation that's drastically different from another, so that as you do start uncovering value, you know that all of those insights are the same, and then you can start thinking creatively of how you might want to use them in other ways. So this next slide shows the three other components of what's possible with Looker once you kind of go beyond BI. And so one of those is just integrated insights. Technology is not often the problem. There are a bunch of tools to get your data into these fast solutions. These solutions are often infinitely scalable. So generally, one of the problems when it comes to data adoption, and this comes maybe more into the data culture piece, is that there's always this change management component that comes with data. And so Looker's goal is to not just have those definitions live in our siloed BI part of the product, but how can we push those insights and make sure that people have access to that data in the tools that they're used to operating in. So maybe that's embedding in PowerPoint so that you can have dynamic presentations in the boardroom. Or if you have a sales staff using Salesforce, we can have real estate carved out for Looker there. Or making sure even just something simply as pushing the right insights to the right people to do their job and letting them start learning these new tools organically. We can also do a lot of data-driven workflows. So just passively in the background, we've identified patterns, we integrate with machine learning tools. How can we then start using that to trigger things in other solutions? And we'll have some good examples of that as we go to some of the customer stories. But then finally, we actually open up all of those definitions via an API layer so that you can take those definitions and build your own custom applications, your own web portals, and create whatever that user experience is you want for either your customers or your internal employees. So what brings this all together is Datametica and Looker have a joint customer in the Chicagoland area. They're a technology and devices company. And Datametica helps with that migration to the cloud using all of the automated technologies and the three birds that Dr. Phil had described in his part of the presentation. And then they brought Looker to sit on top of that. And what we've now been able to do with them is really breaking out into three pillars: running your business, growing your business, and transforming your business. And so to help run the business, the very first use case we started out here was, again, actually understanding the data that you had. So providing that governed single source of truth so that people could understand what was happening in the devices, what metrics and insights could easily be gleaned, and then also used so that data scientists who maybe would spend 70% of their time data munging can now leverage those data insights to easily get the data they need to do further exploration and predictive work on top of that data so they can start generating insights, which ultimately resulted in about a 400% ROI, largely just driven to some of the efficiencies that they had in the team so that their actual skilled analyst team could focus on expanding the capabilities that the company had without always having to handheld and provide clean data to the end users who are asking questions. The second bucket here was grow your business. And so when we went back to that application side of things in the architecture slide, that's literally what a component of their business is driving towards. So they created a prescriptive analytics software that they're actually going out and selling, Looker is the entire backend component, all of the governance, the permissioning, the modeling capabilities, generating the SQL needed to talk to BigQuery, as well as doing a lot of cool things around dynamic benchmarking. And then what they're just doing is building their own front end using JavaScript on top of our APIs and creating their own custom software that they're then going out into the market and selling. So as of today, they already have 11 customers that are live on this software that's powered by Looker. And then they're expecting to grow that to 30 plus. And so that's what I would just challenge everyone on this call to think about, not just data and how it can be used to help the organization, but how do you start treating data as an asset, and what value exists in your data that you could potentially sell to other people within the industry? Because there could be really interesting trends there that you can start generating these new revenue streams. And then finally, just transforming your business. We have a scary and exciting time that we're currently still in due to COVID. Because they have all of these devices and they're used in warehouses and stores, had a really unique opportunity to be able to actually start doing kind of like store by store, warehouse by warehouse contact tracing. So they used Looker to actually rethink the way that they could use their devices to operate in this new world. But that isn't going to end when COVID ends. They're going to take those same learnings and use this to create a broader suite of workforce solutions and products so that they can maybe identify where there are choke points in a process, or where there are a lot of people in a certain area where there are not a lot of people, and use those insights to power things even beyond some of the times that we find with COVID. So that is, I think, the conclusion here. And we have some next steps, and we also have 2 minutes or so to address any questions that the audience may have. So I'm going to pass it back to Allison, our lovely MC.
Thank you, Phil, and thank you, Dr. Phil. So when we are looking at our next steps, we would love to hear from you in our survey to understand if you would like to participate in a complimentary workshop with Datametica or a personalized demo with Looker, so that we can really dive into your business and help you build out some of these business outcomes that you're trying to achieve. And then it looks like we do have a few questions in the Q&A chat box. First question, I think this is for you, Dr. Phil. We write, I have concerns about the size of my data and how to migrate to the cloud. How do I address that?
Yeah, that was an issue years gone by, not anymore. First of all, historical loads, we have appliances. We can load the data on appliance. So we may have, 2 petabytes of data, let's say, in a very big company. We will load that onto appliances, ship that. So within 2, 3 to 4 weeks max, we will have that data onto GCP. And then we build the data pipelines for the incrementals, which are usually manageable over a network. Always are manageable over a network. And then we have our Pelican tool, which we talked about. We'll do the data validation in real time, or near to real time, between the two systems. So now we have historical data loaded, the incremental data pipeline set up. We have Pelican running continuously. We can guarantee that the data is matching between the on-premise and cloud. It doesn't matter how big it is. We've moved companies with 5.5 petabytes, for example, and still been successful.
Excellent. Moving on to the next question. This one will also be for you, Dr. Phil. BI and analytics systems are critical to my business. How do I migrate without impacting my business?
Yep, there always are. Those BI tools are always involved on those legacy systems. So we can repoint all of those legacy systems to BQ, for example, when we do that. Some of those BI tools are less friendly to cloud than others. Most of them will work fine now. A few years ago, that was not the truth, but it is mostly true now. And this is an opportunity for Looker here, because the Looker is natively GCP and web enabled, and is a perfect tool to modernize too. So we do have, for example, customers that have years, maybe a decade or two of Cognos use on, say, Teradata. As they move, they realize Cognos is rather old and inefficient, and they can start to modernize. As we move the data, we can modernize to Looker as well. That is starting to become a pattern that we see. But yes, all of the BI tools can be repointed to cloud. but there are modernization opportunities as we do that, either as a same time or as a second phase.
Great, thank you. And then I think we have time for one more question. Phil, this one is for you, Phil Paul. I do have BI tools already in place. I'm specifically using Tableau and Power BI. How does Looker differentiate from some of these other tools?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you go back, or I guess I can probably move back to that architecture slide, one of the things where Looker differentiates is we do use those definitions to try to go beyond just a lot of the reporting and dashboards. So there are a lot of tools with great visualizations. If you have those tools and you really enjoy them, Looker by no means needs to replace them right away. We see our strengths as really being around that self-service piece, knowing that they have those trusted layers to play with, as well as opening up those concepts into these broader ways that you can start thinking of data. So just as an example, something that Tableau is amazing at would just be customizability and creating best-of-breed dashboards and visualizations. Where Tableau can sometimes struggle is actually having a way to encourage consistency and trust in the data as you push to that. So you might have certain workloads where you want that customizability, and Tableau might be the right answer. You might have others where the customizability isn't as important. You want people to be able to ask questions without help and trusting those, and those would be better use cases for Looker. And then over time, we even have customers where Looker can help deliver some governed data sources from that self-service capacity if people then did want to bring it into Tableau. So there's a lot of different variations on the question, and I'm always happy to have deeper conversations around that.
Excellent, thank you so much. And I think with that, we are just over time. Our presenters, is there anything else you'd like to add before we head out for the day?
No, other than follow up there. We'd love to follow up with you. Doesn't matter what scale you have, how complex your questions are, we're here to help you.
I think that's it for me.
Well, thank you all. Excellent. Well, thank you all again for joining us today for our masterclass. This recording will be sent to you so you can review it again. And we are looking forward to hearing from you soon. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.